We are live for episode number 110 of Empire State of Baseball. It's Monday, November the 18th, 2024. We're airing on Instagram, X, and YouTube. And as always, powered by StreamYard. And it is the off-season series. And as always, as we've kicked off every single off-season series, we kick things off with one of my favorite episodes of the entire year. Corey Favs, what is that episode that I'm talking about?
Oh, this is the off-season agenda. And I got to say, Rich, too, this is one of my favorites. I love doing this episode. It takes a little while to prepare. I mean, we all have to go through and we're not just making, all right, what are a few trades or a few acquisitions that a team's going to make? We have to go through the full roster, do all the financials. So it's work. You have to dive through spreadsheets, formulas, but it's fun. I love the prep for this show. I love the show itself. I love seeing everyone's agenda for both teams. So it's going to be a fun show today.
Yeah. This is so interesting. I like doing it, and we just don't go with the 25-man roster. We're in the 40-man roster territory here. We're making moves. We're making sure our teams have enough depth. We're looking at down the roster things. We're calculating what the 40-man price is going to be, which is the price that's going to go against your luxury tax number. So that we take all of that into consideration here. And listen, we try to have some fun with it. I think there's two approaches that we usually take, a realistic approach and some maybe not so realistic, but the point is to have fun and try to see what direction we can bring the teams in this year.
Yeah, I think the big approach that we have for these are our approaches. If we were David Stearns or if we were Brian Cashman, these are the moves we would want to make. We're not projecting that these will be the moves. Hey, if I was in charge, if I was in, the GM, these are the kind of moves I would like to make. So I don't think some of these trades maybe we're putting out there, or some of these signings we're prognosticating. We're putting our own creativity to spin here.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's what it's all about. Creativity, having some fun. And obviously we're having some fun right now. I think this might be the first episode of ESP where I didn't wear a hat, but I had to pull off my best Theo Epstein impersonation for tonight's episode of ESP.
I think Theo Epstein would, button his sleeves though. I mean, what are we doing here, Rich?
Oh, we're button. Oh yeah, we didn't button the sleeves.
We're not buttoning the sleeves.
All right, listen, we're doing this for 90 minutes. You look already. Give me a break.
You came from a wedding. You're on the bus. You're kind of drunk. You threw your jacket back on. You're sweaty. That's
I would have the tie wrapped around my head like
you're a tie wrapped around the head guy. Yeah, of course.
The
you
headband,
are.
exactly. But Thomas, I don't know if Roback's selling headbands or any maybe even good wedding stuff. But what has Roback got? Latest and greatest.
As far as bands go, they actually sell bandanas for dogs. That's an option. I haven't talked about that on the show. We're going down the well. But listen, Roback right now is rolling through their early Cyber Monday, Black Friday, whatever you want to call it, sale 20% off site-wide. They're still putting a lot of new stuff out, a lot of new winter stuff. I keep talking about it, but new fleeces, heavier sweatshirts, heavier Q-zips. They got the full jackets, a bunch of really good stuff over there at Roback. Of course, always the classic Q-zips, polos, hoodies like I'm wearing tonight. Head over to roback.com. Normally, I would tell you to use promo code TWASPL15 to get yourself 15% off. And if you're watching live, you don't need the code right now. It's you get 20% off for the sale going on. You can't stack the code. If you're watching this on the replay, if you're watching this on YouTube later on, and we're in the month of December, the code should be back active once the sale ends.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much for that. And with that, let's get into our Roback rundown. Keeping this very simple, since we are in the off-season series, these episodes, which will be scheduled on a tri-weekly basis, not necessarily it covers our reoccurring stuff that we usually do. It's more we just focus in on one topic per episode. So tonight's topic, as Corey mentioned and the guys mentioned before, is the off-season agenda episode. So we're going to go in an interesting order, and you guys will see why, because one big theme of tonight's off-season agenda, which I think separates itself from the last two we've done back in 2022 and 2023, is there is a superstar free agent that is familiar around these parts that both these teams are hot in the negotiations for. So it's going to be a lot of fun because tonight, not only are you going to get the two Met plans and the two Yankee plans, but each of those sets of plans will have a separate Soto and non-Soto plan as well. So Tom is going to kick things off with his offseason agenda for the Yankees. Then we'll jump over to Joe's plan for the Mets. We'll come back to the Yankees with my plan, and then Corey's going to wrap things up with his plan for the New York Mets. So Thomas, you're kicking this thing off, man. Before we get to your overall offseason agenda, there are some big moves you want to highlight for a set agenda. Let's pull this up.
Let's pull it up here. So we're going to start on the left, right, Richard? So
Yes,
we're
sir.
starting in the bullpen. We are starting with the trade that we'll get into a little bit more later with the St. Louis Cardinals for closer / setup man Ryan Helsley. We got him joining the squad. Over on the right, we have someone the Yankees have been long rumored to acquire, another trade target, this time with the Seattle Mariners with Mr. Luis Castillo. And in the middle, we got a guy who really performed in the postseason. It's Teoscar Hernandez. No, it's not. It's Juan Soto. The Yankees signed Juan Soto. That's my big three moves of the agenda. And we'll get into the rest of the moves here because there's plenty of other parts and even some spots where Juan Soto, maybe you're looking, hey, where is he on the diamond? He's at first base. That's part of my plan here. So where do we start? I actually kind of first want to start with how do we know the Yankees are going to have a little bit of being up against the luxury tax and how do you clear some money? So I have a bunch of guys we are shedding. I think it's on another slide, Richard. Okay, cool. We'll go there. So I'm non-tendering a bunch of guys: JT Brubaker, Mark Leiter Jr., Tim Meza, Jose Trevino, and Trent Grisham. Trent Grisham especially, he's expected to get paid $5 million this year. Can't be paying Trent Grisham $5 million to not play. And then the other one I have the Yankees working out a deal with DJ LeMahieu to have him go away and kind of do a Bobby Bonilla but smaller type deal where the Yankees, they owe him $30 million over the next 2 years. I instead want to pay DJ LeMahieu $5 million a year for the next 8 years, so he gets an additional $10 million and he rides off into the sunset. So doing that has created a lot of cap space, or not a lot, but enough cap space for me to make some more moves. So we'll start with Mr. Soto. I have him signing where is it on the thing somewhere? Yeah, I'm just really screwing with you, Rich. I have him signing a 14-year, $630 million contract with an opt-out after 2028, because I do think part of these negotiations with Soto is because he's so young, he might want to have the ability to opt out to maybe break his number again. I have him getting, I think this is $45 million a year, I think that's what it ended up coming out to being. I don't have the math in front of me again. But listen, he might want more in 4 years, so I have him getting an opt out there. And the big thing with
million. Yeah, it's $45 million.
Got it. And the big thing with him is I need him to learn how to play first base. Him or Judge, frankly, but I'd rather him because I think Judge is a better fielder and get him back into right field. Partially because we can't have Aaron Judge playing center field still. The man is 6'8", 280 pounds. He's not meant to be playing center field, especially at the age he is at this point. So I have Soto learning how to play first base. And you might think, well, hey, the Yankees are going to put more guys out of position with Soto at first. I would point to, is Bryce Harper, was he a career first baseman? Did he learn how to pick it up? And Bryce Harper was really good as a first baseman last year. I don't think Bryce Harper is innately a lot more athletic or talented than Juan Soto is. I think Juan Soto, given an offseason, could really pick it up and become a solid first baseman. All right, so that's the Soto part of it. Let's go to Luis Castillo. So the Yankees are a team that are constantly there. If there's a guy they want, it always seems like they'll get him, if not immediately, eventually. We talked before the show, Carlos. Oh my God, blanking on his name. Center fielder, Yankees. He was signed with the Mets in 2005. Carlos Beltran. I'm like, why can't I think of his last name? I kept wanting to say Gomez. I'm like, that's not right. Carlos Beltran. Yankees always wanted Carlos Beltran. Didn't get him. Eventually got him later. Recently, we've seen guys like, you don't want to always think about guys like IKF, but the Yankees apparently always want IKF, and then Garrett Cole, another one, right? Someone who they targeted and just couldn't get at the time. Luis Castillo has been rumored to be traded to the Yankees for probably half a decade, and they never seem to be able to get it to happen. Mariners are a team that is loaded with pitching and could use some help offensively. So I have the Yankees moving. I have them moving. Spencer Jones is a big part. The Yankees' number 2 prospect. Roderick Arias, who is the Yankees' 4th prospect, another shortstop, and Marcus Stroman in the deal to the Mariners for Luis Castillo. Castillo is owed a decent amount of money over the next, I want to say, 4 years. And listen, the Yankees could really use another guy to be on the top of that rotation with Cole, with Rodon, with new Rookie of the Year, Luis Heel, which I think could really make a formidable rotation. Also, selfishly, would love to see what happens with the hair policy if Castillo comes over. Maybe this could be what breaks the hair policy, which is kind of important to me as well. So that's one of the big trades I have going on there.
Hair, I like those rows. Those are nice.
Yeah. So listen, it could be a win-win for us here. Other move I have is I have the Yankees acquiring Ryan Helsley, like I said, from the St. Louis Cardinals for Nestor Cortez. And I know the baseball trade value does favor the Yankees here. I think even though Helsley is a better player than Nestor, I think the value of a starting pitcher who can go out there and give you, 20, well over 20 starts a year is very valuable to a team like the Cardinals at a reasonable amount. They've liked former Yankees in St. Louis that, you have your Jordan Montgomerys, they have Sonny Gray there now. So it seems like the Yankees and the Cardinals have some kind of, however they're pitching, like prospecting or scouting reports are set up, they like the same kind of guy. So I think he can move over. Helsley comes over and steps into, I have him in the setup role. I still have Luke Weaver as the closer, but that could be more fluid as the season goes on. They both owed it's about the same amount of money and they're on their last year of, before they become free agents. So this is kind of a 1 year for 1 year swap. So those are the big moves I have. Other moves I have are, we'll start in the infield. I have the Yankees going out and acquiring Jorge Polanco, signing him to a 2-year, $20 million contract. He was the Mariners did not pick up his option, which I think was like 20. It was for $12.5 million. I want to say was the option he had. They did not decide to pick it up. Polanco had a down year last year. If you look at his numbers, they're bad. But you know what? Everyone's numbers are bad when they go to Seattle. Teoscar Hernandez, who I mentioned earlier in the show, he was there before he went to the Dodgers. And then he joined the Dodgers and he lit the world on fire again. I like Jorge Polanco to play second base. He is not the greatest defender of all time. But I do think he could be serviceable over there, switch hitter, and I have him leading off for the team. Other move I have is bringing in one of Met favorites, Michael Conforto, to play left field. I have him signing a 2-year, $10 million deal coming over from San Francisco. He's hit. He has continued to hit, even though he's been out in San Francisco, which is not usually a great hitter's park. He's played in New York. He's done well. He only left because he got injured and all of that. I have him playing left field for the Yankees. Some other smaller moves, I have the Yankees bringing back Tim Hill and Tommy Kahnle. I have them also signing former Brave AJ Minter to add to that bullpen as I've DFA'd a bunch of the other guys. And then finally, I have the Yankees signing Michael A. Taylor to be our backup outfielder. If you look at our bench, Ben Rice, I have him as our backup catcher, has shown some pop at times, but the other 3 guys are speedy and versatile players, guys who can, Michael A. Taylor is really more for just an outfielder, but very fast. But then I'm keeping Birdie, I'm keeping Oswaldo, who can play everywhere. Again, they're good defenders. They could run. I think it could be a good mix for this team, especially with a guy like Polanco, Stanton, Conforto, guys who you're going to want to pinch run for at times. I think that gives you the ability to do that. And I think with that, as Rich has said to me on the side that no one else could see, I'm about at time. So I'm going to turn it over. 8:15. You told me, Rich, and it's 8:15. So I will turn it
8:15 on the
over
dot.
to Joe to yell at me to tell me that these are all bad moves.
Go ahead, Joe.
All right. So I think you came up with a Luis Castillo trade that is one of the better ones that I've seen. I actually think that's a legitimate trade that could happen as that is structured. I'm actually very impressed, Tom. I don't like to give you
Joe, can I ask a question to the chat since we got a lot of Yankee fans in the chat? Would you do this trade? Luis Castillo to the Yankees and the Yankees sending Roderick Arias, Spencer Jones, and Marcus Stroman in the deal. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. Where you go a little off, I don't think Cortez is going to do it for Helsley. Helsley's a legitimate closer. Also, if you're bringing Helsley in, he's closing. So
I'll give more. Listen, I'll throw some more guys in that deal. I think this offseason, I'm truly embracing something it's been part of me for a while, that prospects are suspects until they come up. So I don't care that Spencer Jones is supposed to be this. I don't care, because most prospects don't work out. You know who's good? Luis Castillo. So I'm ready to move him, and I'll trade prospects with Cortez to get Helsley.
I agree, and I don't like the valuation of Castillo on these trade values.
Yeah,
he's
negative.
It's the contract.
I'll tell you, it's improved though. I recently checked because when Tom submitted this originally, he had a negative. He was like at a negative 30 value.
Yeah, I could have traded Ian Hamilton for him and came out just overpaying.
No, 180 in pitchers don't grow on trees, and that's why the Helsley thing. I think you're gonna have to. I think you'd add a prospect. I don't see St. Louis taking on Nestor Cortez when St. Louis is clearly in a rebuild mode. And then the other thing I would have to say, it's not that any of these moves are outlandish. I think your value on some of your free agent contracts, like Conforto's getting more than $5 million a year. Tim Hill's getting more than $1 million a year. AJ Minter
Tim Hill got paid like peanuts last year.
I understand, but he has a track record now. And AJ Minter made $6.5 million last year alone. AJ Minter had a good year. He's going to get $6 million a year.
I will say I was going off of a lot of what Spotrac, and then I was adding on to what Spotrac was projecting for some guys. I know Spotrac is
our
not
best friend throughout this entire process.
Yeah. So listen, like I said, I'm not a ringing endorsement for that, but that is kind of what I was going off of. Tim Hill, I'll disagree. I don't think Tim Hill, maybe another $500,000 more, at most $2 million, but he's not getting that much.
The Minter and the Conforto ones are going to go higher. So I know you're trying to keep it under 301, but Michael would probably get $10 million a year, and Minter's probably going to get $6 or $7.5
I don't know if he's
year.
getting $10 million a year.
Well, what was he making with the Giants?
His last, he was part of that was I think he got it was $18 million.
It was 18.
Conforto made 18 last year.
He's gonna get a paid decline, but and don't get me wrong, I think that's a good fit for the Yankees in that stadium.
Conforto would be fun to watch over there.
Yeah. His market value, according to Spotrac right now, is $4.7 million. But Corey, what were your thoughts on the roster assembled here by Tom?
Yeah, no, the Castillo trade, I agree. I think that's a perfect trade for the Yankees. And again, for a player like Castillo, you're going to have to give up some top prospects. So you're giving up, I think you said, a 2 and a 4, and Stroman on top of that. So I think that's a very fair deal. Me personally, if I was a Yankee fan, I would be very happy with that. Castillo is one of those guys where he's not really a true ace, in my opinion, at least not now, but he's the perfect number 2 starter. So you put him right there in between Cole and Rodon. I think that's a very nice 2 starter for your team. So kudos for that Castillo trade. I really like that a lot. Helsley would be a great get too, because again, you caught lightning in a bottle last season with Luke Weaver, and he was lights out. He did great in the playoffs as well. But is he going to be the Luke Weaver we saw in September and October, or is he going to be Luke Weaver that was the most of his career with a high ERA? You never know. So lightning with the bottle, doing that Helsley trade works out good. It gives you a legitimate option should you have to make the switch away from Weaver. So we'll see what happens there. I love the bullpen moves you've made in general. Again, I mentioned before, Conforto, it would be really fun to watch in that Yankee Stadium lineup. I know he's not really the same player he was when he was younger with the Mets, but I think he could easily go back to a 30 home run stroke in Yankee Stadium with that, right field porch. So we'll see what happens. And the Soto at first base, I think long term, most people do think that's where Soto will probably end up. You saw the outfield defense really hurt the Yankees in the playoffs. I mean, Judge was great in center field all year, but you had that bad miscue. Soto had a couple miscues in right field himself. And Juan Soto will be a nice, he's got to pick it up. But like you said, Tom, guys like Bryce Harper picked it up, and now it's like they played the position forever. They do a serviceable job at first base. So we'll see. Hopefully Juan Soto could pick that up. If not, then I guess you move him back to the outfield, eventually DH when Stanton's gone. But I do like the construction. I think the lineup itself, especially if Conforto is hitting with pop, which I think he would in that stadium, I think it's a deep lineup. It gives you a nice seventh option down there at the bottom. So overall, I like the moves.
I wanted to highlight the Soto at first base thing in our chat here. Our guy, LA Yankee King, and a shout out and a happy birthday to LA Yankee King. Ha ha, I'm not the only one with Juan Soto to first base. In your faces, people. Always got to be the bad guy. And then Uptown Sports TV, that's our guy Hector. Shout out to Hector. Tom has given LA Yankee King the take about Juan Soto moving to first base some legitimacy. LA Yankee King will never be defeated. So yeah, I mean, it is it's a chance you're taking. You're paying this guy historic money to play a position he's never played in his professional career. You're the general manager of this team, Tom. How are you making this offer to Juan Soto, telling him, hey, like, you got to learn a new position come 2025?
I'm saying I'm paying you $640 million, and I want you to pick up a slightly bigger glove, and I would like you to play first base where you don't have to run around as much. The Yankees, if they sign Soto, Judge can't keep playing center field. He's serviceable in center. If he's not gonna, if they're gonna sign him, if the very least you got to move Judge to left. And then I don't like that outfield. I just don't think Judge is in right field is a very good potential Gold Glove finalist level of right fielder. He's a below average center fielder, and he's getting older. So I just don't see he can't stay there. So yeah, I mean, I tell Soto, listen, this is what we would like you to do. We want you to play first. We want you to pick up that position. I think using someone like Bryce Harper as an example. Now we know he's there because of injury, but hey, you could do well there, and then you're also then in the kind of like the vein of an Albert Pujols or Miguel Cabrera. I'm sure guys that Soto has looked up to, kind of coming up in baseball as guys that were outfielders or third baseman at times. They eventually kind of moved around a little bit, and then they settled at first, and they just stayed hitting. So that's my pitch to Juan Soto. Also, again, I'm paying you $630 million. I would like you to play first base, please. Thank you.
It's interesting. So DJ LeMahieu gets released. So you're reworking that deal, as you said before, to 8 years of paying him $5 million per year. So, I give you credit for creatively working around paying Juan Soto big money, bringing in Luis Castillo and sending Marcus Stroman. You knocked out two birds with one stone there. And and that's a deal that I think most fans would do. And would the Mariners do that deal? I mean, you're getting quality prospects in here. You're getting a pitcher to put in the middle to back into your rotation. It is definitely an interesting one. It is looking at almost like a deep dive into the financials. So you have an evaluation of $296 million or a little over. So you're just for a little under $5 million from the 301. So you're still in tax tier 3. Just looking at those top 10 in AAV. Soto right at the top of the list there. Still paying freaking Aaron Hicks. I think Aaron Hicks is paid $7.4 million for one more season. I think he goes down to $1 million following the 2025 campaign. So a couple of guys in retained salaries. You're retaining Rizzo $6 million because of the buyout, and like you mentioned before, you're reworking DJ for $5 million per year. So we started at 246.37 and ended with 296.39. Somehow staying under the luxury tax by bringing in guys like Luis Castillo and Juan Soto.
It's creative.
It's creative. Very good job there. So Thomas, great job on the offseason agenda there for the New York Yankees fans. What do we think of Tom's plan? Scale of 1 to 10. How realistic does that plan seem that Tom laid out there before?
I don't know
Let's
how
get to some of the
realistic
chat.
it is.
Let's get some of the chat comments. I meant to highlight these earlier. Jacob Petruzzi, the fellas are on the road to 1,000. Let's get them there. We got a long way to get there. We just passed over 400. So yes, just keep the likes, the subs, the shares, all that stuff coming. We do appreciate it. Joey Bag of Donuts in the building as well. And then I got a lot of comments of the Theo look here. How did your meeting with Soto go? Well, according to certain people on the app, apparently Soto's meeting with the Yankees didn't go well. If you're listening to people without check marks or people with check marks, it doesn't really matter. Rich looks like he's selling healthcare insurance as a side hustle. A lot of says looking snazzy. Well, I'm drunk on pineapple juice. Okay, there, Jacob. Very good. Christy Evans, I'm only here for bad roster constructions. What's up, boys? What's going on? Chris, shout out to Hitman. CK just making sure that, hey, you're bringing in Ryan Helsley, but Luke Weaver still remains the closer of the New York Yankees for Tom's plan. Fun, humble guy. What do you think the Mets ship McNeil to the Yankees, taking salary extension at using that short porch? It's funny. We kind of talked about that.
We talked about this pregame, and actually I said the perfect trade would be McNeil for Stroman straight up. The problem is Stroman burned his. I don't think the Mets want Stroman back. Otherwise, he would have fit that rotation they'll need. And McNeil apparently over the last few seasons would average like 7 more home runs a year in Yankee Stadium. So there's like an interesting stat where he would abuse the short porch. It would fit a need for both of them. I just don't think the Yankees can get there with anyone else. I think it would have had to been Stroman, and the Mets aren't going to take Stroman.
I think at this point, after however the Soto thing shakes out, I think both teams are going to lose the other one's number for a little bit, because I think one team is going to feel very, very spurned and are not gonna want to pick up the phone.
Shout out to Keith from Shea and Sons, loving the graphic. We love Keith and his content, so give Shea and Sons a subscribe over on YouTube. Doing a great job with the off-season content. NFE in the building. Subscribe to NFE and the Strike Zone. NFE always holding it down, doing a great job. Aaron Rodgers hating on Tom's plan. -1,000 to Tom. So that's unfortunate. That's unfortunate.
Thanks,
Chisholm, his daddy, says 5. Probably because I don't even know why. Chisholm just goes 5s. Andrew G. Rob, Rich got a job interview after this? I don't know, maybe. And then we got Ask Gardner. Our guy Jojo, Rich smells like rotten cheese, and this roster looks like the 4th in the AL East. # Braves country. All right. Well, speaking of Braves, let's flip over to Jojo's favorite team. Actually, wait, before we do that, let's talk about Instagram. Corey Favs, what's the latest and greatest with Instagram?
Yeah, go ahead, follow us on Instagram and join our 6,800 followers and growing. We're not too far off from 7K at Empire State of Baseball. Over there, you'll find all our archive segments, all our meme reels. You'll find graphics from the show. They make their way over there. So it's fun. Instagram's a fun app. Go ahead and follow us there. You could also follow us individually, myself at Corey Favs, Joe at JR Pugs, Rich at Rich J. Rivera, and Tom at T. Wospil.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, Corey. Let's turn over to Joe and his offseason agenda for the New York Mets. Joe, what are your biggest moves for your offseason plan?
Okay. So I got the Mets spending a lot of money this offseason. I don't think anybody doesn't have the Mets spending a lot of money this offseason. The first move is actually going to probably be the most realistic, which is the Mets bring back their slugging first baseman, Pete Alonso. I have Pete signing a 6-year, $147 million deal, a little higher than the AAV value that they offered him before the season. Big lumber and first basemen aren't getting big contracts. I think the idea that Pete's going to get more than $200 million is absurd. I don't see where that's going to come from at this point. And I think the Mets are going to be left there saying, we'll take you back. We'll give you more than $20 million a year, and we'll have you play first base. The second one is a former Stearns employee when he was with the Brewers, and that is to sign Corbin Burns to a 7-year, $224 million deal. He is the prize pitcher, the number 1 ace, the guy that the Mets think they need at that top of the rotation to make all the difference. I think that's somebody that they're highly, highly interested in, and would be my number one target as a free agent pitcher this year. And then my top deal and the top player, of course, is the Mets signing none other than Juan Soto. 13 years, $650 million I have it at. Not far off from the reported 660, the reported from Mr. Baerga yesterday. 13 years, $650 million. It's $50 million AAV. And I have Soto coming to the Mets. I think at this particular point in time, the further we go into it, the more confident I am that Steve Cohen is not going to be denied this player. He is going to pay him the most, and I think it's going to be in the ballpark of $650 million. So those are my big three guys, and we can bring you to the rest of the roster and show you and give you a little bit of breakdown of the things I'm doing.
No one's getting non-tendered.
What'd you say?
I said no one's getting non-tendered.
No non-tenders. I think the Mets, the guys that are available for the Mets right now are all useful and serve a purpose. So that's a big one. The biggest trade I have is Ryan Presley from the Astros. I believe he had an option that he opted into. He's going to be making $14 million this year. Houston has to re-sign their third baseman. I think giving him a catching prospect in Kevin Prada, who needs a little bit of a change of scenery, gets $14 million off the books, and there's a chance with that money that the Astros can afford to bring Bregman back. I think that's a great thing. Presley, outside of this year, had only given up one run in his last 12 appearances in the playoffs. Up until this year, he gave up 3 in the game against Detroit this year. I like him coming in and being one of the setup men for Edwin Diaz, has that playoff experience. And if he can, how these relief pitches are, can be a good anchor in the back of that bullpen. Other free agent signs, I got them bringing back Sean Manaea. Sean Manaea said he wants to be back here. 3 years, $55 million. I think that comes out to 18.5, if I'm not mistaken, Rich. 3 years, $55.5 million. I think he'll be back. He said he wants to be back. And I think that's a good mark for him. I think he wants a couple-year deal, to a chance to make some money. Lefty Andrew Chafin on a 1 year, $4.5 million deal. The Mets have been flirting with him the last couple of years, where he went to the Diamondbacks. The Mets need a lefty in the pen. Chafin's one of those guys. And I do have Michael Conforto here, much like Tom, at a 2 year, $25 million deal, around 12.5. Conforto is going to be a platoon. So in this scenario, I have Conforto platoon, a straight platoon with Starlin Marte. I have Tyrone Taylor starting in center field. I think Drew Gilbert's going to be up sooner rather than later. I think Taylor and Gilbert, who are one's a righty, one's a lefty, are going to be a straight platoon as well. So I have the Mets platooning in not only the DH spot, but the center field slot. And the good news with Conforto, with Marte, with Taylor, that gives the Mets the flexibility. Soto can DH a day. Alonso can DH a day. Nimmo can DH a day. And the Mets can afford to move guys around, and that gives them a lot of flexibility that I know Stearns really wants. So I think that's a good offseason plan for me. I tried to find another juicier trade. I just didn't feel that the Mets, once you get Soto and Alonso and Burns, that the rest of the offseason, it's really just about filling out that rotation. I didn't see the Mets selling 3 of their 5 top prospects to go out and get a Garrett Crochet. I don't think they're going to spend the money and get a Sonny Gray for the next 3 or 4 years. I think this is a big way, and this is one that's going to challenge them, that make them challenge for the top of the National League.
Got a quick question from the chat, and I'm going to ask you, Joe. From CK here, he asked, since Vientos was a beast last year, do you think Beatty will be traded?
I'm not sure. If this scenario arises, I think there's a high probability Beatty does get traded. I think the Mets are going to keep him as long as he has options and as long as they don't have to move him. But listen, something's going to give. Jet Williams is their top infield prospect. Ronnie Mauricio is coming off of ACL surgery. Beatty plays infield position. Luis Angel Acuna. They're not going to have space for all these guys. Vientos has earned his spot. So some of these guys are going to go. Can I see that for a bullpen arm? Yes. Can I see that for another starting pitcher midway through the season? Yes, I think those are all factors and all possibilities. But I think the Mets are going to do what Stearns does best and keep flexibility as long as possible. And by keeping those trade chips in his back pocket, he has the ability to go out and get anybody he wants mid-season as well as the offseason.
So my biggest question that I have to ask you, because obviously this is an off-season that Met fans thrilled about. You get Pete back. You get Corbin Burns in the mix. You get a back-end reliever in Presley. You get Soto. But, Joe, you had $138 million of space before you hit the luxury tax tier 3-1, and you still went over. Somehow, some way, you still went over.
There's ways, and maybe the answer is simply I gave Conforto too much money, or I could have dumped McNeil somewhere. Frankly, I think once you sign Juan Soto, I think the luxury tax is an afterthought for Cohen. And remember, you got almost $21 million of Marte that's on a 1-year deal. You have Ryan Presley, who's going to have $14 million on a 1-year deal. Chafin is going to have 1 year, $4 million. So it's not like the Mets are going to lose flexibility over the next few years. They're going to drop another $40 million in the next offseason in payroll anyway. So, yeah, you're probably right. I probably could have stayed under the 314. I probably could have given Conforto a little less, but that's my rough estimate there. And again, it's fluid, as Stephen A. Smith likes to say. The list is fluid. The Mets just signed a reliever today. I forget his name, but the Mets did sign a reliever. So my bullpen is actually inaccurate as of this morning. But this is the relative look.
That was to a major league deal?
Yes, it was to a major league deal.
Oh, look at that. See, we're already out of date. Look at that. That happens, though. Corey, your thoughts?
Corey, you're on mute.
Corey is
all right.
Corey's doing his thing.
Nope, you're on mute.
He's on mute. Okay, well, Tom, how about you?
He's back. He's back.
All right, good. I was double muted somehow, and I was only unmuting the one. Okay, that explains why I couldn't get some points in before. Real quick, too, ironically, too, the 314, that's actually a payroll reduction. So despite
it is.
It's a payroll reduction for the New York Mets. So that's a little bit of a plus. I was going to make a comment on the Beatty trade that was mentioned in the chat. Beatty gets traded, and I actually think closer to 50-50 in terms if he gets traded. I think the plans with Pete Alonso getting re-signed increases the likelihood, and I think it makes it more likely that Beatty gets traded just because then you have no choice. Vientos is either third base or DH. So I do think Beatty would be involved in a trade if they re-sign Alonso. Now, if they don't, I think it's more likely they end up keeping Beatty. Correct. So we'll see. Even if they get a Christian Walker, I think the chances of keeping Beatty if they don't re-sign Pete changes. Yes. In general too, I gotta say, you hit the big three between Soto, Burns, and Pete Alonso. That is the holy trinity to make a nice Christmas morning for Mets fans. So
the Pinta de Santa Maria.
Exactly. I would absolutely love if this happens. I probably, as a Met fan, I would be more happy with this plan too, because again, I want Juan Soto. I feel pretty good in the Mets' chances of getting Juan Soto. So I would love this plan. It gives the Mets a legitimate ace. You're bringing back Minaya, middle of the rotation. You hope Senga's back. That's not a bad starting rotation.
Rich, pop that lineup up. This lineup is a legitimate big time. That's a big time lineup.
Yep.
That is, Juan Soto's protected by Pete Alonso, Vientos, who's a young star. And again, you can play with this a little bit. But overall, this is a lineup that is going to contend with the top lineups in the National League. This is a lineup that is going to be tough. You have a former batting champ batting 7th. You have a former number 1 prospect batting 8th. This is a legitimate heart of the lineup where you have an all-star caliber player in your top 5 in your lineup. So for me, that contends with when I'm looking at what I need to win. That's why I think Soto is a necessity for the Mets. In order to be on the level of the Braves, you need Soto in the middle of that order. In order for the Mets to contend with the Dodgers at the top level, you need Soto in the heart of that order. Yes, you need a pitcher or two to also help that, but that's the big piece. That is the missing piece of a Mets lineup. That lineup looks a lot different. If you take Soto out and put Conforto or Marte in there and then somebody else at DH, that's a lot different of a lineup than Juan Soto in the middle of that order.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that lineup. I think the only other 2 comments I make, the Presley and Parada trade. I mean, as a Met fan, I would love it. And Kevin Parada, it's a shame what happened to him because I think at one point he might have been the Mets top, or at least he was a top 3 prospect for the Mets at one point, and his value is completely tanked. So I don't know if that's enough for Presley. I don't know what value Parada has on the market anymore. But as a Met fan, again, I would like it if it did happen. I like the return of Conforto too. And again, I don't know what his market value is worth. Is it close to what Tom has? Is it close to what you have? Time will tell. And then the Alonso extension. This is another one that I'm not sure exactly where it's going to end up. Now we know he wants $200 million. Me and you both agree he's not worth $200 million. At the same time, considering the way contracts have gone over the last few years, you look at a guy like Freddie Freeman, and he's a cream of the crop first baseman. But the contracts have gotten a lot crazier since Freddie Freeman was just a free agent a few years ago. So I'm very intrigued to see what happens with the Alonso deal. I have a gut feeling it's going to be somewhere in the middle, closer to Freeman. But time will tell. I just don't know what his value's worth on the market now.
I've seen 7 different projections with Alonso, including people who think he's going to sign for $250 million, which I think is just absurd. So I'm kind of going where Freddie and Goldschmidt and Olsen signed. I'm in that range. I think that's completely fair. Those guys are all better players than Pete as whole players. Alonso can slug with every single one of them. But I just don't see where $200 million is coming from. Unless the Mariners are so desperate that they're going to throw $200 million at him, I just don't see what team's going to do that.
Yeah, that's the only place I see that. Yeah, so that's the only place I see that happening. So a couple things. One, hate this whole Juan Soto thing. That's wrong. Let's just get that off the screen. Don't want to see that anymore. Juan Soto's the Yankee. It's already basically signed. I think he's actually signing right now with Hal. So
I was just on the phone.
Really disqualifies his entire lineup. But yeah, obviously this makes the Mets a lot better of a team. I'll hit a little bit. I know we talked a lot about Soto there and Alonso. I'll hit a little bit on Minaya. I know some people are saying they think he's going to get paid a lot more than that. I don't see it. Sean Minaya had a good year last year. I mean, he wasn't incredible. And the few years before that, he's been like average to below average. I think I know he turned down the qualifying offer, and people are saying if he's going to turn down $21 million, why would he sign for 55 over 3 years? Because I think he realizes that, man, it's going to fall apart really quick. He could sign that, even if he signs that qualifying offer and he's bad this year, then he's not going to get anything. He's going to be in that Severino area, just like, hey, someone please sign me so I could build my value up. I think Minaya would take a deal like this. I think there's other teams that are going to send deals like this to him. So he did seemingly like pitching for the Mets and the organization of the clubhouse, so that gives them the leg up.
Well, he did the right thing turning down the offer, though.
I agree. I agree doing the right thing because you're just signing a deal like this. Yeah, because it's not you sign a qualifying offer. You're either you're bad and you have no chance of making that money again, or you're signing as like that pillow contract to get the bigger one. And I mean, Sean and I would have to go out and have an incredible year next year to get a good deal. So I think this is him cashing in and good for him. He was very good with
extra $30 million
last year. Yeah, listen, extra $30 million. A guy who probably going into last year signing with the Mets would been happy to make $30 million for the rest of his career.
Correct.
And he's making $30 million more. So
I went off the Stroman. Basically, it's the Stroman contract. It's very similar to Stroman, and Stroman had a much longer track record than Minaya. That's the only reason I felt it was a reasonable spot to be in, and I think you're right. I don't think it's about the money. I don't think it's about the 21.5 necessarily. I think it's about the security of the next 3 to 4 years that he's looking for. I think that's going to be the neighborhood. He's not going to get 25 million.
Yeah, no, there's no way. If you look at his track record, he's been good to below average for most of his career. I mean, in a lot of years, he's kind of below average. So yeah, like he's happy with this, and I think it's like a decent enough deal that's gonna afford it. I mean, listen, you went, as Rich pointed out, you went over the luxury tax. And there's this idea that Cohen's this, and Corey pointed out, this is a payroll reduction. I mean, listen, I think at some point Cohen, he does have a limited amount of money. Not that he has, but he's gonna be willing to spend. There's one thing that rich people like, it's having money and keeping their money. So I don't think Steve Cohen isn't a drunk like Nepo baby who is just like spending daddy's money willy-nilly. Like he's a guy who's like, in ways earned this money. I don't think he's just gonna like, let's spend $500 million this year and get nuts like some Met fans. I'm not saying you're saying that, Joe, but some Mets fans think.
There's a way. There was a way I could have stayed under. Admittedly, like I said, I could have traded McNeil. I think.
I think also, dude, you look at the non-tenders. I was going to make this comment before. Paul Blackburn's going to make $6 million. I mean, that's money you get right back.
The only thing I'd say with the Blackburn's going to start this season on the IL, and after the first 5 pitches, Christian Scott's hurt. He's out for the year with Tommy John. After that, who's the next? Jose Budo could slot into the rotation, but the Mets I would assume that the Mets want the flexibility of having a legitimate major league caliber pitcher in the back end of their rotation with Blackburn.
Yeah, I think Blackburn, again, it's a coin flip. It's major league depth. He's going to start off hurt, but that was David Pearson last year. Pearson missed the first 2 months, and he ended up being an integral part of the playoff run. So it's a major league piece.
So Joe enters tier 4. The spoiler alert, the only general manager tonight to enter tier 4 but hey, listen, they called the Cohen tax for a reason. So Joe is going out there and saying, Steve, come on, give me some money. So no remaining tax base, goes a little over 13 million there at start at 162.95. So spending spree there for Joseph. Joe, there was one comment, and then I'm going to get to my plan about the lineup. There was actually a couple of comments here about the lineup, but from GSD. So shout out to GSD for joining here first time. They really need to bat behind Pete in that projected lineup. That lineup is poor, top heavy, and then Sierra, they just joshing around here. Super ugly lineup. But Joe, your comments on that?
I mean, Nimmo's got a 365 on base percentage. Yeah, Nimmo's not a 30 home run hitter, but there are worse guys to have hitting 5th behind Pete Alonso. Now you could turn around and flip Pete and Mark Vientos and say Pete's going to hit number 2 with Soto protecting him, and that gives Pete an opportunity to hit more home runs. But I think this is the Yankee point. I want Soto, who's got 400 plus on base percentage, in front of my slugger. I want to give Pete the most opportunity to drive guys in on base. And again, Marte's going to play against lefties. Conforto would play against righties. McNeil, you'd even almost have a platoon where McNeil's playing second base, he's playing left field, he's playing right field, depending on the day, and Acuna can slot in at second base. He's a righty, McNeil's a lefty. And then the biggest wild card in all this is what Francisco Alvarez is going to bring to you. Are we going to get Francisco Alvarez that has the potential to hit 30 home runs out of the catcher spot? Or are we going to get Francisco Alvarez who's going to hit 1 home run and then go 1 for his next 15? I don't know the answer to that, but at the end of the day, you're 1 through 7, you are putting a legitimate major league above average bat at every position in that lineup. And that was my goal, is to make that lineup long. And we saw that exact option from the Dodgers this year. They had Tommy Edman, Kike Hernandez, those kind of guys at the bottom of the order. just good, legitimate major league players.
Shout out to Tyrone Taylor. He's a gamer. I love having him on the team.
Yep. Rich, you're on mute.
Okay, that's two now today. All right, great job here, Joe. Again, there's a lot of fans in our comments not happy to see Juan Soto in the 3 spot, but hey, I mean, this
get that off the screen. Move it off the screen.
A very realistic thing, but we'll get it off the screen here. We'll move on. We're gonna move on to the Yankees offseason agenda, my version of it this time. But before we do that, Tom, let's talk about the tube.
Let's talk about the tube, and YouTube again is our preferred way to watch the show. I know we have some people watching us on Twitter. You can watch us on Instagram as well, but YouTube is our main spots where we really try to build this community up. It's the best way to get your comments read on the show. Also, if you're not watching the show live, this is the place to watch replays, watch different cut-ups of the show as well. So head over to YouTube if you haven't yet. Give us a follow, subscribe. Hit that little notification bell so you know when we go live, which is, as Rich said, a little more sporadic in the off season, a lot more regimented during the regular season.
Every 3 weeks over here on YouTube, among our other platforms as well, but this is where you get the full experience. So it's right here on YouTube. Let's go back to the Yankees for my off-season agenda. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying that we are throwing out the Yankees playbook here of bringing back Juan Soto. This is where we're going to the non-Soto part of our show.
I already don't like it.
You got to get a little bit creative here.
I get used
when
to
you're
it.
Talking about allocating funds instead of sending it off, well, most of them, off to one player. The Yankees are coming into this offseason with about a $55 million to spend. So you got to get a little creative there. You got to move some contracts, but let's get into the biggest moves. Starting off with a player who's been a St. Louis Cardinal for the past 3 seasons. This is it's a young player, a utility player who on my squad would be playing left field, and that is Brendan Donovan, who would be acquired via trade with the St. Louis Cardinals. We'll get into the details on that shortly. Our next player will also be sourced through the trade market. This guy's coming over from a West Coast team, and this would be our first baseman for the 2025 season and 2026 season, since he comes off the books after that season. We're not going down the Christian Walker route. We're not going down the Pete Alonso route. We're not going down the Yandy Diaz route. We are going to Nathaniel Lowe to take over at first base for the New York Yankees. We got the details on that trade in a minute. And finally, our biggest cog of this offseason is a position that I feel needs to be addressed. And it's been a long time since the Yankees have had a sustainable third baseman. It's been a while. I probably honestly, since Alex Rodriguez at this rate, the Yankees have had a lot of open door, a swinging door there at third base for all this time. They go to free agency with this one, and they're going to go and sign Alex Bregman. And I got him coming on a 7-year, $210 million contract. Whether you like it or hate it, in my all-season plan, we're bringing in a guy who knows how to win in Alex Bregman. Whether you hate the way he won or not, this is a guy who's the reigning Gold Glove Award winner. There is definitely an emphasis on defense when you look at these 3 players.
Rich about to get
again,
they don't like Rich right now.
They're about to deep fry you in that suit, Richard.
I know it's coming. So let's get more into it. The offseason agenda here. I'm staying under the cap here. I'm staying at 293.37. There's your lineup. The non-tender deadline, which is approaching. I think it's actually this Friday. JT Brubaker, Trent Grisham, Tim Meza, Jose Trevino, thank you for your service. DJ LeMahieu, I'm buying him out. There's no need to have this player on the team anymore. I'd had enough of him taking playing time away from young players or any player at that matter. He is a shell of the player he was when he penned that contract back in 2021. So DJ LeMahieu, I'm eating the $15 million year over year. I hate doing it, but it's got to be done. Bregman comes over 7 years, 210. Now, it was revealed today that apparently Scott Boras wants 11 years for the free agent third baseman. A little wild there. I think getting to the 6, 7.
He might have been getting his Soto stuff crossed. He might have, he's an old man at this point, Scott Boras. He might have just got his papers mixed up.
It's just unrealistic. We're bringing back Tim Hill. I'm giving him the Luke Weaver deal. It's the same deal. 1 year, $2 million with a $2.5 million club option for 2027. I think Tim Hill did a great job as the left-handed reliever. Adam Duvall, 1 year, $4 million. just as a backup outfielder, cheap option, a couple mil cheaper than keeping Trent Grisham. And I know he's not as great of a fielder as Trent, but just having a veteran presence on the bench like that and out of Duvall is nice to have. I'm taking a shot in the starting rotation, and I'll talk about why I'm bringing Walker Buehler and how I had a clear spot for him. Walker Buehler, I'm taking a chance on. 2 years, $30 million. His market value, according to Spot Track, and now this is a wild evaluation, but they have a market value of $3.9 million on Walker Buehler, which I'm not buying. I know he had a bad year. Not buying that for one bit. You're thinking of a starting pitcher at the back end of your rotation. You're at least paying, you're definitely paying at least over $10 million. I think for Buehler too, coming off an up and down postseason, worth the risk. 2 years, $30 million, I think is a realistic evaluation on Walker. And then just looking at the trades. Shout out to my guy, L.I. Yankee King. I didn't do 18 trades here, but I went with 4. And 4 I feel very good about. So starting with the biggest moves, Brendan Donovan. We're piecing away with some capital here from the prospect end. Kyle Carr, Tyler Hardman, George Lombard Jr., and Will Warren are going in the trade to bring in Donovan. The Cardinals, obviously, I make sure these teams that I'm trading with are always going to win in BTV. This is probably by the slimmest of margins here between the Donovan, and it might, because Donovan's got 3 years of control, he's been a consistent player for these past 3 seasons. It's going to cost a little bit to bring in a player like that. And what I love Donovan's versatility. I have him in left field. Who knows? That could be second base when Chisholm comes off his contract. It could be center field depending on how Dominguez performs a full season of center field. So there's value to have a player like that can mix in multiple positions. Skipping down to the Nathaniel Lowe deal, that exact deal is Lowe and Walter Pennington, who is a left-handed reliever for the Texas Rangers. I'm sending over Nestor Cortez because the Texas Rangers have no left-handed starting pitchers outside of, I believe, Cody Bradford. But the Rangers are trying to figure out ways to creatively cut payroll, but try to stay competitive. Texas wins this deal 18.5 to the Yankees 9. I also send Ben Rice as a possibility to fill out the first base role. They do have guys in their system. Ezekiel Duran would go to the top of their depth chart at first base. And I'm also sending Gage Zeal, who's the Yankees' number 24 prospect in their system. I'm dumping Marcus Stroman. I got to open up a spot here, and to dump Marcus Stroman, unless you're going to get creative like Tom did, I did the simple route. I'm eating most of the contracts, sending him to the Angels, a team that's looking to build with veteran players with some postseason experience. They're doing little different things over there in Los Angeles right now. All I'm asking, give me that 40-man roster spot right there. Bryce Teodosio, no one's ever heard of him. So I'm just bringing him on, eating the money, getting Stroman off the team. And finally, the last move I haven't addressed is the deal with the San Francisco Giants, bringing in 2 relievers. Taking a chance on Camilo Doval, coming off his worst year. Got 100 miles per hour on that cutter. I got to take a shot at seeing what you can get out of Doval with the Giants. And Taylor Rogers helped subsidize the deal a little bit because he is making $12 million as a left-handed reliever. I'm sending over Mark Leiter Jr., who's got 3 years of control. So there's value in kind of swapping the contracts. The Giants are still going to win the contract game at the end of the day. They get my number 23 prospect in Xavier Marte and the number 10 prospect now. He's fallen down to 10, Everson Pereira as well. So they get a major league outfielder as well. Giants win that deal 16.7 to 1 on the BTV. So I think that just about covered it. The lineup here, we went Donovan in the leadoff, Judge at second. We're moving Judge back into the 2-hole. We got Lowe hitting third, Bregman 4. So that's going to be your 4 for a good amount of time. Well, your 5 with Stanton for the next couple of years. And I say, hey, what a better time than start in 2025 with what could be your future lineup for this New York Yankees team. Does it have the most attractive piece in the middle? I'd say Bregman definitely gives you a bit of a name, but it gives you a name in a position that the Yankees desperately need to figure out. The Yankees haven't had a solution for third base in a very long time. And I know he's probably not the most popular name, and I'm going to pull up the chat shortly. I'm sure I'm getting roasted here. But Alex Bregman, still top of the line defensive player at third base. A guy you want in your clubhouse in the biggest games imaginable. And I don't care. If the comments are about 2017 or 2019 or whatever, every year the Astros beating the Yankees, I don't want to hear it. If a player can help your team win and is certainly in a position of need, you got to do it. So Alex Bregman for the next 7 years with the New York Yankees. I think that just about does it. So
Rich, you got my plan up right now.
Who wants to go roast me first? Go ahead.
Well, first I like the Juan Soto part. That's my favorite part about this.
Oh,
plan.
sorry,
I would like that plan a lot.
Wow, that was
I'll go elephant in the room and talk about Alex Bregman. Rich, you and I have talked about this offline. I like Alex Bregman. I think he really could bring something to the Yankees. Yes, I know 2017. Yes, I know trash cans. I think he's someone who's been a winner. He's come from an organization that, frankly, probably didn't need to cheat when they did cheat, which made it almost worse. But then we're great after that as well. I think the Yankees need that presence. I think they thought Rizzo would provide it, and while he was a very good member of the clubhouse, seemed to get along with everyone, that didn't seem like the kind of guy who was like holding people accountable. And with Boone as your manager, as someone who is very player friendly, I think you need someone to say, listen, like, this is how you win a World Series, and let me show you the way to do that. So I do like that. I don't like that contract for him. I think that sounds like what he's going to get paid. It just, to me, that's a lot of money for Alex Bregman. That's my big like hold up on this, on that deal. Donovan and Lowe, quality players. I worry a little bit about, them coming over and just kind of not handling the spotlight of New York, and that becomes a bit of an issue. Now you can say that's just about anyone you bring in, but I think I just worry. I think the Brendan Donovan hype train is, and not just you, Rich, just in general, is crazy high. So that's a little concerning for me. Love the Walker Buehler move. I think that would be a great move for the Yankees, giving him that opt out to say, listen, hey, if you crush and you want to go get paid, thank you for your service, and we'll move on. I don't know about the Doval and the Rogers move. I don't know if that's. I don't think that gets that deal done. Just because I think Mark Leiter Jr. is, no one wants him, and Everson Pereira is Yankee fans put him in every trade, myself included.
We're also taking a bad contract if you're measuring relievers who are making over $10 million. If they're not performing up to par, that's a contract that any team wants to try to get rid of. So it definitely lowers the deal.
Well, the only thing I would say is teams are hesitant to trade away two relievers in the same deal. That's a tough ask. I think you get Duvall. I think you could get Duvall for Leiter and Marte. I wouldn't be surprised if they want to dump him for that. I don't think they would include Rogers because I think they like Rogers, and at the end of the day, they still need a semblance of a bullpen and a good arm in the back of the bullpen. That's the one that I would say. And I do think I know the values over here with the low trade. I think you're going to have to give up a little bit better of a prospect over here. I don't think anybody considers Ben Rice
Joe, you haven't spent enough time Yankee Twitter. Ben Rice to some people is essentially the next coming of Donnie Baseball.
I think the best hope for Ben Rice is he provides some left-handed pop for some teams. I don't think he's a major league everyday player. So I actually think you would have to put Pereira in the bottom deal. If you flip Pereira and Rice in the two deals, I actually think you end up in a better, more likely scenario. Okay. But that would be my thing. I think the one thing that you did accomplish, Rich, that I don't think Tom accomplished, and I don't think a lot of people really have an answer for, is you got somebody who has the potential to be the Yankees' leadoff hitter. And I think that's one of the biggest things that the Yankees have had problems with in recent years. They haven't had a legitimate person who is a good everyday leadoff hitter, and you plug them there and you don't have to worry about them. You don't have to think about if that person's going to be a leadoff hitter next month, the month after. I think Donovan, or in this case, I know it's not traditional to have your first baseman be a leadoff hitter. I think Lowe can handle kind of that problem too. But Donovan is one of those guys I would have no problem putting at the top of my order, forgetting about him. Is he going to steal your bases? No, he's not. No. But he's a good base runner. Donovan's one of those guys who's good at everything, not exceptional at anything.
That's what worries about me as well. I feel like I want something more out of him.
You want something more concrete, but Thomas,
the Yankees don't have enough of those guys. The Yankees don't have enough guys that are good at everything.
Yeah, looking at
Soto, you're throwing out the Yankees handbook. But go ahead, Corey. I'll get more into that.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, I think with this moves, I'm gonna do one pro and one con just to kind of summarize the roster. I think the biggest pro here is that you're going to get a much more fundamental team that you saw compared against this team that just played in the playoffs too, because you're putting guys in natural positions too. All right, you get a legitimate, very good third baseman playing third base. Jazz actually played a pretty good third base this time with the Yankees, a lot better than I thought he would, but he's going back to his natural position of second base. Nathaniel Lowe, a natural first baseman. He's also won a championship, so he's a gamer, Nathaniel Lowe. Brendan Donovan, he's a utility knife, but he's actually played left field more than any other position, so he's in left field. And you're putting Judge back in right field where he belongs. So this is a much more fundamental team.
Correct.
I think it might be a little less frustrating. You're not going to get some of those head scratcher and moments that make you want to scream, like that notorious inning that we saw in the playoffs. You're not going to have a lot of that. I think the one con, losing Soto, it does something to this lineup where it feels like it's just missing something. It's missing that one big piece. I think with this lineup, in order to have the same success with offense, you really want Giancarlo Stanton to be performing at a consistent level throughout the season. Now, if you're getting Giancarlo Stanton that you saw in the postseason, this lineup is set. It is stacked. You're good to go. But you don't know. Stanton's such a wild card. What player are you going to get there? I think that's going to be a big key because Soto Soto single-handedly won games. He's such an interesting player because he has that ability. So I think in order for this lineup to have the same overall success, we need Stanton to produce at the level he can. But I do think it's a much more fundamental lineup, and it's going to be a better defensive lineup, and you're not going to have those moments where you want to slam your head against the wall.
When I thought about this team and how I wanted to construct it, yes, one of the biggest priorities is getting guys back into their natural position. But I was just thinking about ways the Yankees lost games, the way the teams could have been better. The Yankees, and outside of I don't want to get killed by Sierra here, outside of the last 2 months of Gleyber Torres, the New York Yankees did not have a pure leadoff hitter. Solved. The Yankees' defensive woes showed up significantly throughout the postseason. We have players in their natural position, and not only that, the players we're bringing on are also great defensive players. Donovan's a great defensive utility man. Bregman's the reigning Gold Glove at third base. Lowe is a solid defensive first baseman that can run into a couple. So you're bringing in guys that help you position-wise. So Corey, you nailed that on the head. I also like the idea of taking pressure off the young guys in this league. You see where our young guys are in this batting order? They're the bottom. Dominguez, Wells, Volpe, right at the bottom. And I think if you're putting a team together and you're third of the lineup is relying on young players and trying to find their way through the pros, keep them in the non-pressure roles. So keeping Dominguez, Wells, Volpe. This is not Wells hitting fourth. This is not Volpe leading off. This is not Dominguez hitting in the middle. No, this is a very fluid bottom three. Keeps the pressure off of them. And if you think about there's a speed factor. Jazz Chisholm, Dominguez, Volpe, there's guys that will lead speed-wise can lead you to big innings when your big boppers are coming up 2, 3, 4. So I think also, in a non-Soto world, you got to go Judge back in the 2 spot. You got to get that offense, that one time in the order at least. You got to get him one more time in the order at the very minimum. I think putting him in the 2 spot is realistic. But yes, you're missing a bit of firepower. Absolutely, when you don't have Soto in there. But if you're going a non-Soto route, you got to throw out the Yankees handbook on acquiring players. This is a more fluid team. This is a better defensive team. You have control over a lot of these players. And there's probably I'm losing a lot of love for Bregman, but you know what? Again, this is a solid third baseman. If you're going to spend in free agency, guys, I'm sorry. First base is always a market that there's going to be players there. I'm not going to lie. I'm not in love with the first base market. And I like the idea of having a lefty. I love the idea of solidifying one position of need. Third base has been that position for years. The Yankees haven't been stable in. I'm going with the enemy. Going with the villain. I'll play the villain. Alex Bregman's my guy.
I think the big issue the Yankees are going to have this offseason, if the Soto plan doesn't go to fruition, is now, Joe, you could take a walk. I will. No. Is now there's not going to be another Juan Soto like free agent out there. But the problem is the drop off for an offensive player is so drastic from Soto, and he was so important in that lineup offensively that if the Yankees don't get him, I don't know what they do. I think it becomes kind of grim, and I know that gets Joe all standing at attention, but I just don't. This lineup, I just don't. You did your best you could with that. I'm not saying it's not your fault. The options aren't there. This lineup just doesn't do it for me. But
can I ask you this question, Tom?
No.
What do you think is a better combination of 4 players? Soto, Rizzo, Verdugo, Torres, or Donovan, Lowe, Bregman, and Dominguez?
I think it's a pointless question because we're not gonna have Verdugo.
I don't think it's a pointless question because you can't think about replacing the one player. You have to think about replacing the combination of players that you are losing. And I can make the argument, and I might be the only one that's going to make it. I think this combination of 4 players is better than what the Yankees had losing the World Series in 5 games.
But you're not going to have those 3 other players. You're not going to have Verdugo. You're not going to have Rizzo, and you're not going to have Glaber. So I think it's kind of a moot point. Are you saying the Yankees are going to replace those guys anyway?
And the combination of players that I'm losing to the players that I'm replacing them with. That's the question. I really don't think it's a hard question.
No, because I think Juan Soto is that good. I think Juan Soto is that good. Again, the Yankees' problem is they can't pivot to another just like superstar player that doesn't exist. I think if the Yankees don't get Soto, I truly wonder what they do. There's they're not going to punt on the year, but like I don't want to give. I would like to have Bregman in. I do think he'd be so good for the team. I just giving him that much money for that long just seems like a massive mistake.
It's
a cost. So.
It's a double-edged sword with the Yankees. They're almost in a position you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. If they get Juan Soto back, they're not going to have flexibility to add professional players at these positions that they're lacking in and that they were lacking in last year. That's the reality of the situation. Unless they get exceedingly creative in the trades, they're just not going to be able to do it. As you saw in your plan, Tom, yes, you brought Soto back. You still you didn't solve the problem with the leadoff hitter, and that gets increasingly more difficult with Soto being back. Jorge Polanco's not a leadoff hitter, regardless of what you think or anybody thinks. It's just that's not a perfect solution in that situation, and neither is Michael Conforto in that situation. So that remains to be an issue. I think the problem with Rich's plan is that team a better rounded team than you had last year? The answer is absolutely yes. You have a professional player at more positions than you did last year. You had a better defensive team, but Tom is right. The elite offensive production at the top end is not going to be the same. So I don't necessarily think that this would be as good of a team on the ceiling end as you had last year. However, it is a more balanced team. It's going to be a less frustrating team.
I think if the Yankees
I don't think it's a 90-win team, but it's definitely, I would say it's an 88-ish win team in this scenario because I think if the Yankees you're just not going to have the floor.
If the Yankees don't sign Soto, I think they would be better suited going to the pitching market and going after a Burns or a Fried, and then also trading for another, big time starter like I had the Castillo trade and say, listen, we're throwing out 4 ace style pitchers, and listen, we're gonna have to scratch it together with the offense, maybe sign some veterans to come in. But like I think that would be
I don't think the Yankees
team.
need pitching. That's the thing.
But if you're gonna spend the money, I would rather spend the money there. I think it's where I would land. But
the problem with the Yankees pitching is they spent $28 million on Carlos Rodon. He's not that good.
No, I mean, yeah, but we can't think about that now. That's why
I will say my last comment though with Rich's lineup too, and again, the whole Juan Soto talk. There's no doubt that because of Juan Soto, he carried the Yankees offense a lot. He won a lot of big moments with the Yankees. But I got to say, I think with Rich's lineup, if you look specifically at that Dodgers series, I think it goes 7 games.
Mm-hmm.
Just because of how the fundamentals went against their way.
The most important thing about Rich's lineup and the way he's constructed the team, in 3 years, you have the flexibility to do more. When you bring back Soto, you're going to lose that flexibility for a very long time.
Yeah,
that's not how the Yankees operate, though.
No,
They don't
I understand
operate to
that,
be
but
more
the
flexible
Yankees
in 3 years.
The Yankees need to get a little bit in between where they're not locked into just 4 players at the top and filling it in with garbage. They have to find a way. They have to find a middle ground. And right now, if you bring back Soto, between Cole, Judge, Soto, Rodon, your top 4 players at $180 million for the next 6 years are locked in. I mean, that's it. That's your top players for the next 5 years.
Just real quick on the financials, and then we'll move on to the next one there. So look here, we started at 246.37, ended at 293.37 after everything. So still a little under 8 million of tax space there for retained. We got DJ. We're essentially eating the 15 a year. Sucks. That's 15 year over year for the next 2 years. Stroman's 9.33 is that's the money we're eating on our deal sent to the Angels. And I think the thing with the Walker Buehler deal, for me at least, with the starting pitching market that's out there right now, it's a very strong starting pitching market. My goal was moving Nestor and be able to bring in an offensive player. Now, could more have gone to Texas? Yeah, I think so. I think an upgrade in prospect, I think, gets that deal done. But for me, going to a bottom end guy that is not a project, but it is certainly an X factor because we've seen his ceiling. We've certainly seen his floor last year. I'm curious to see what the Yankees could do with a pitcher like Walker Buehler in that rotation at the back end. So let's move on. Before we get to our final offseason agenda, that's going to be Corey Favs' New York Mets. Joe, let's talk about X.
Yes, you can join us on X, join our 3,000 plus followers, and follow at ESB Podcast on X. You can follow our Mets account at ESBNYM, and you can follow our Yankee account at ESBNYY. The Mets one is run by myself and Corey. You can follow us at JRPugs, at GGory. And the Yankees one is run by at Sierra Not Missed, Rich J. Rivera, at Rich J. Rivera, and Tom at T. Wospil. All on X. Give us all a follow. Keep up with us. We've been tweeting out all off season as we've seen news and rumors and everything. So you follow us there.
Couple comments here that I want to shout out my guy Josh, the accountant. Awesome job, guys. Don't listen to Aaron. Who listens to Aaron?
Aaron's a closet.
Shout out to Nitha Ramataja. Congrats to Luis Hill on winning Rookie of the Year. Yes, Luis Hill winning Rookie of the Year, and shout out to a friend of the show, Joey Bag of Donuts, who won $50 because Luis Hill won the Rookie of the Year. Shout out to him. And my good buddy Joe here. Contract numbers are way too much for Bregman, regardless of how anybody feels personally. No team should be giving him more than 175. And listen, man, that definitely can be debatable. You got Scott Boras as an agent. Who the hell knows? They went out today.
Scott had a rough year last year.
He had a rough year last year, and he's got Bregman on an 11-year contract. It's so unrealistic, but good for Scott, I guess. Still the best in the business somehow, some way. Corey Favs, let's get to your off-season agenda for the New York Mets, the final one of tonight's show, and start with your biggest plans for this offseason.
All right, who's ready to get a little freaky? All right, well, anyway, starting off here, and again, this is the non-Juan Soto route. I just want to say I really want Soto. I feel good in the Mets' chances of getting Soto, but it's no guarantee we get Soto. So we have to be prepared if we do not, and this is the route you could take if you do not. So starting it off is re-signing a familiar face in Pete Alonso, and again, we were talking before when Joe did his agenda about what he's worth. He wants $200 million. I don't think he's worth that much. I think Joe's value is more of what I think he's worth. So I split the gap somewhere in the middle. I said 168 total over 6. Then they still need more offense. They need a little more firepower. So go out there and get Anthony Santander. 5 years, $100 million seems to be about the average. I've seen 5 years pretty consistently. I've seen about $90 million. I've seen up to 110. I average it right in the middle, again, about $100 million contract. And the Mets definitely need to add at least one starting pitcher, really at least 2, because they do have to actually re-sign Minaya. So the pitcher that I have the Mets targeting in terms of a big name is Luis Castillo. So this is a name that we saw earlier in Tom's agenda with his trade. So I have him coming to the Mets as part of a deal in this offseason. So these are the big 3, addresses a few different needs. Now, there's a lot going on here on the left side because I wanted to get fun. Again, it's an offseason agenda. Let's have some fun with it. And I'll talk through my reasonings behind a few of these trades too. Starting off with Luis Castillo, we mentioned it before. The values are way, it's way undervalued. He's not a -3 value player. So I have Brett Beatty going over there. You have to give up some decent prospects. So Ryan Clifford is the big prospect, number 4. He's probably going to be a top 2 prospect this year. I think he's starting to climb up a little bit. A couple other guys climbing down. So Ryan Clifford's the biggest name. Marco Vargas is another decent prospect. He's only 13, but he's been jumping up. I think at one point he was around 20 with the Marlins, shot up to 18, shot up to 13. He's steadily climbing up, gives them another infielder. And Jeff McNeil is interesting too, because I did hear the Mariners are interested in getting some veteran talent out there, some veteran offensive talent. The problem with McNeil is the money he's owed. So as part of this trade, I actually have the Mets taking on the Luis Castillo contract and eating a decent chunk of cash on McNeil to send it over. So that's my reasoning behind this trade. It gives the Mariners a lot of offensive players, which is what they've been lacking, both young and a veteran in McNeil, in exchange for a pitcher, which the Mets need. The Mets need to add at least 1 or 2 number 3 starters or more. They really need an ace. The next trade is the interesting one. So I know Crochet has been a very, very big name this offseason. And Luis Robert Jr., too, he might be on the trade block. We'll see what happens with him. But I don't have them going to the Mets. I have them going to the Orioles. The Orioles making the big trade. The thing with this type of deal, if you're going to get a Crochet and a Luis Robert Jr., you really have to give a lot of good young players. You're not trying to give up veterans. The White Sox do not need any veterans. So in order to make this trade work, I actually have the Mets taking Cedric Mullins and his 1 year. I think he has 1 for $9 million or $7 million, somewhere in that ballpark left. Mullins has absolutely no value for the White Sox. So I have the Mets getting Mullins and shipping out 3 prospects. Colin Hook, who is I think the first-round pick a few years ago, shortstop. Alex Ramirez, who was once a top 5 prospect, has completely tanked, but still has some pop. And Mike Vasil, another starting pitching prospect for the Mets, who, again, was once a top 10 prospect. His values kind of declined a little bit. But, again, the White Sox would have absolutely no interest in Mullins, so this is getting them some younger players in their system. Samuel Basallo is going to be an absolute stud, a guy who could hit 40 bombs each and every year. The problem is he's blocked. All right, he's a catcher by trade. They have Rushman. They said, all right, what about first base? Well, their top prospect, Mayo, even though he's third baseman, most people project him to play first base long term. So you're really going to want to hold on to that value as a long-term DH. So I think this is the chance where you could trade Basallo maybe for a big piece to help your team now. Orioles are a team. They're firmly in it. They want to go now. You get a Crochet, you get Luis Robert Jr., and then from a Mets fan standpoint, you're getting Cedric Mullins, a pretty good outfielder. I think he gives you more value than a Taylor gave you. At the same time, because it's lefty-righty, if Mullins really struggles, you can give Taylor a few starts in center field, and it's not going to hurt you. Mullins adds decent glove. He adds decent speed in that lineup, so I think it's interesting. Anthony Santander, I actually have him at DH. I basically have Santander giving you what the Mets hoped J.D. Martinez would give them. Unfortunately, Martinez really fell off for the Mets this year. Santander, the good thing about him, too, is he can also play the outfield. So even though right now I have Nimmo in left and Marte in right, I could see a lot of instances where Marte is getting the blow at DH and Santander is starting out there. Maybe Nimmo's getting a blow one day to get Santander out there. So it gives a little bit of flexibility with the roster. The other moves, too, bringing back Sean Manaea. I mean, me and Joe both agree we want Manaea back. I had 2 years, $40 million, a little more value, but I didn't give him the third year. I made it a vesting option for the third year. Whatever the option is, we'll see. But I gave a vesting option for that year. Walker Buehler, similar to Rich, I went the big money on a short-term contracts, prove it, see what you want to do. Basically made it a clone of the Luis Severino deal that the Mets made last offseason. 1 year prove it deal and great, hit free agency next year. So same exact contract as Luis Severino. You slot him there in the 4th spot, right between Manaea and Peterson, split up the lefties. A few other moves, too, for the Mets. They got to fix the bullpen a little bit. So we're going to get Tim Hill, familiar face on the other side of town, to give you another lefty in there. Ryan Stanek, I want to bring him back. He was such a reliable arm for the Mets in the playoffs, so I definitely want him back. Blake Treinen, I mean, he pitched phenomenally for the Dodgers in the playoffs. I mean, he was such a big part of that team, so I would love to bring him back as well to help set up that back end of the bullpen for Diaz. So I think this gives you a little bit of balance in that bullpen, especially the backside of the bullpen. It gives you a pitcher. And again, I don't think Luis Castillo is a true ace. I think he's like a 1B. Same thing with Senga. Senga's not a true ace, but I think he's a 1B. Minaya is a middle of the rotation starter who happened to have an ace-like year for the Mets. He goes where he belongs in the 3 spot. And then at the bottom, Walker Buehler and David Pearson. You get some upside potential, and you hope you get some good outings from them. The bench, I just threw in Adam Frazier for there. He's basically the Joey Wendell of this offseason. If he makes it, great. If he doesn't make it, you cut him, cut your losses. Basically, that last bench spot, you just want it to be a versatile piece. A versatile piece could play a ton of positions. That's Adam Frazier. And I brought back Jose Iglesias. I have Acuna as the starting second baseman just because I think even in a bad year, if he's not hitting, he's going to give you gold glove potential defense, and he's going to give you a lot of speed, and that's exactly what you want at the bottom of the lineup. But Iglesias would play a lot in this scenario. He's probably going to play some second base. He'll play some third base when you have Vientos, DH, and Santander in the outfield. So I think this roster gives the Mets a lot of versatility in terms of who's going to play DH this day, who's playing the outfield, get Iglesias in there. But that was my overall structure with here. It's like, all right, how can we get creative in terms of improving the team while also not breaking the bank without signing Soto? Because I think the good thing with this, too, you reduce the payroll by a lot. It gets you down to the third tier. I do think there's some concerns about going the 7 years with Burns. I'm not sure if, we'll see what happens. I know from a Cohen standpoint, I think they would do it. Not sure if Stearns wants to go that far in a 30-year-old pitcher. As a fan, I would love to have Burns, but we'll see. I think this gives you some flexibility in the sense that you still have a decent amount of money to spend next offseason if you still have to improve your team even further. So you're not breaking the bank. You could still spend some money next year. And I do think on paper, this is a better team than the Mets ended with this year in the NLCS.
All right. There you go. Joe, comments?
Yeah. So I like, if you go back to the trades, I like the idea of going out and getting Castillo. I think that's a realistic option. I'll put it to you this way. Ryan Clifford is not one I would put in that deal. I have no problem putting Beatty in that deal, especially if you're bringing back Alonso. Clifford's not one I'd put in that deal. I'd look to put another infielder, whether it's Mauricio or somebody else in that situation. I think Clifford's one of your few outfield bats with some power. I'd be very reluctant to give him up.
How bad is McNeil's evaluation that it's a 2.40 value?
He's making $30 million the next 2 years.
Yeah, it's a lot of money.
$20 million on top of it.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
And listen, I think I think you had the right idea. If you're looking at 3-team trades and what you can get, you're obviously going to take a player that the Orioles are looking to replace, and that would be Mullins, and they would be looking to replace him with Robert. And obviously the big prize is Crochet. And from a Chicago perspective, you're just trying to get quantity of as many prospects as you want, as you can get. Houck and Vassell are probably the prizes here. Alex Ramirez, the Mets just added him to the 40-man roster. I had him DFA'd online. I think you're in the right neighborhood with that trade. That being said, I don't have confidence. I have my confidence that Mullins' best days are behind him. I, at this point, don't think he's a center fielder. And I think if you're relying on him to be your center fielder for your team, I personally think that's a mistake. Listen, I like the Blake trying to move. We saw what he could do in the playoffs. I have no problem with that. I have no problem with the bullpen construction. I think you are on the right track there. Where's Jose Budo? Is he in the minors?
I had Budo in the minors just to stretch
Okay.
him out in case you want him in the rotation. I don't think they will. I like him more in the pen myself.
I think
I had him right now in the minors.
Yeah, I think they're going to keep him in the pen.
And he has the option. That was the thing with him. I thought about moving someone else there, but Budo has the option.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, my only thing is, and Santander brings that pop. So there's a lot of pop in this lineup. When I look at this team, I for whatever reason, I'm just not thinking that we're markedly better than we were last year. Castillo is a better pitcher. That obviously helps. As far as the lineup is concerned, I'm not sold that we are overall significantly better than last year, only because I just don't have, to me, I don't have faith in Mullins, and I still think we're missing elite bats. And there is a question mark with Santander. He's a big time home run hitter. But there is a consistency question, I would say, with Santander.
I want to push back on what you just said there, Joe. I think this is a better team than what got knocked out in the NLCS. What did you guys in? The 4 losses were blowouts. This is a better pitching staff. And even with Walker Buehler being somewhat of a project, and Corey, I think you kind of shortchanged Castillo there by saying he's not really an ace. I think he is an ace. I think this is I think this is a far better pitching staff than what was out there in the postseason. Adding Anthony Santander in the middle is obviously an upgrade over JD Martinez, and Cedric Mullins in center field. I think is slightly a better center fielder than what you had out there. I do think this is a better team. I think this is a team that not only competes, I think this is a team that wins the division.
I think the thing with Mullins, too, because it's a 1-year deal. He's a free agent. That's another, I think, again, I forget exactly how much. It's like $7 or $9 million. It's in that ballpark, so that's off the books. And again, if Mullins comes out and is hitting 240 in June, you could call up Gilbert and rotate him in there as well. So there are options you could go. You could platoon with Taylor. Again, I'm a big Taylor fan. I love having him on the team. Mm-hmm. So there's options you can go with Mullins. I think with this route, in my opinion, Soto takes this lineup and moves it from one level to the next. I do think this is an improved lineup compared to what we saw at the end of last season, but it gives you the flexibility as well next offseason. I think that's a big thing with Stearns. The Stearns and Cohen combo, you're going to spend money. I mean, $290 million is a lot of money, but you're a little bit smart and you have a little more long-term flexibility as opposed to kind of backing yourself in a corner with some long-term deals later down the road.
I think so. I do appreciate the creativity you put out, Corey. I almost feel the same way about this non-Soto plan as I feel about Rich's, where I feel like the Mets would almost be better off and they'd have the money to do it. Go acquire 2 ace-type pitchers. If you want to trade for Castillo, fine, but then also sign Fried or sign Burns. And then you're rolling out, hey, we're going to have Castillo, Burns, Senga, Minaya, Peterson, and then you have possibly the maybe the best rotation in baseball. And I think that if you do something like that, you could still you still can sign Pete. You're not going to get your Santander. You're not paying Buehler either. You probably can get creative with some other free agent pieces out there who might be able to kind of plug in for a year or two. I think that would make the Mets a better kind of team. I guess, in my opinion, the Mets are a franchise that has always been based on pitching and starting pitching. They've won so many Cy Youngs, and I think that's in their DNA of who they want to be. Just like how the Yankees in their DNA, they want to hit homers. They're the Bronx Bombers. That's what they're known for. The Mets are known for having great starting pitching. And I think that would be just an incredible rotation that if you got into the playoffs, you'd say, hey, I mean, good luck scoring runs on us in the first 6-7 innings of the game. And we have enough offensive firepower to score. But I think this could be good. I also think that the Santander part of it, he's been, I would push back on Joe. He's been consistent. He broke out last year, but he's been a very good, consistent player. As someone who has had him in fantasy baseball, I think for like half a decade, he's consistent. He puts up solid numbers all the time. But yeah, it's also a lot of money to give to him. So I don't know. Really like what you put out here, the overall.
No, I appreciate it. I think the one thing too, like if I was to make a tweak, we could keep this under that fourth tier threshold by swapping out Buehler for one of the better pitchers. Like, let's say a Max Fried. Max Fried's not going to get Corbin Burns money, but he is going to get over $20 million a year. So there are ways we can get a little bit of an improvement. My thing was just thinking more of the flexibility thing. Buehler blows out his arm or Fried blows out his arm. It's like, all right, well, Buehler's gone next year. Fried's not. So just trying to take a little bit of a different approach.
If you took Buehler off right now, this is what you'd have. You'd have a $27 million, a little over $27 million to spend on a starting pitcher that you feel like is an upgrade.
Yeah. And I do think Buehler himself is an upgrade over a Quintana. But
I think Fried gets near what Rodon got. Like if I had to guess, I would guess that contract would be similar to Carlos Rodon.
But yeah, great job here, Corey. Just kind of diving into the financials again. We started with 162.95. You ended with 290.20 with $147 million acquired here. Your big contracts. Yep, you got Lindor still at the top. Alonso now in the second spot with 28, and Castillo, you're bringing him on. He's making a little over $24 million. Retaining Jeff McNeil because since you're sending him to Seattle with some money, the Mets would be on hook year over year for that $9.08 million. But a very creative offseason by you, sir, to just do what you did and still stay under at 301. Again, the Mets guys had $138 million of space to get creative. Yeah, Joe flew by it. So it was a very good job here to stay under and still, in my opinion, have a better team on the field in 2025. So great job here, Corey. And that will wrap it up for the offseason agendas. Before we close it, let's talk about TikTok. And with TikTok, actually, I'll talk about TikTok real quick. TikTok, make sure to give us a follow at Empire State of Baseball. We've been putting up a lot of Corey's crazy Instagram reels over on TikTok as well. So if you've been enjoying the content on Instagram, you'll enjoy it just as much on TikTok as well. Give us a follow over there. So as we're wrapping up, just some housekeeping stuff. We got another episode of Extra Innings coming up right after tonight's show ended. It was supposed to start 9:35. We're a little late, so we'll probably kick off around the 9:40-ish mark. So make sure to join me, possibly Joe, possibly Corey, hopefully Sierra. It's been a while. Tom, probably not, but hey,
most likely not.
You can join the rest of the ESB team, so you guys can give us a lot of crap for this roster constructions that we did here on the off-season agenda. And speaking of off-season, our next episode of the off-season series will be in 3 weeks' time. We're on a tri-weekly schedule starting tonight. So we'll be back here from Monday, December the 9th at 8 p.m. We'll be right in the middle of winter meetings. So we're going to hopefully have maybe some breaking news to report live on the show. Be at 8 p.m. Eastern time. We also have potential of a special guest joining us as well, but we'll keep you guys posted on said special guest over the next couple of weeks. But it's going to be a fun episode regardless. And let's end this thing. It is 9:37 p.m., so we're a little bit over time, but it was okay. It was well worth it. And just to start off my thank yous, I want to thank my co-hosts here. I want to thank Corey. I want to thank Joe, and I want to thank Tom. You guys did a hell of a job here with the all-season agendas. Once again, proving every year that this is the best show of the year, just because of the creativity comes out right in the middle of this off season, right before where the big moves happen. So you guys did a fantastic job with the research and putting the finances together. Great work on all your end. Also want to thank the 142 people that showed up tonight to support. We really do appreciate it. We thank you so much. And we'll see you here in 3 weeks' time at the minimum in a couple of minutes over on X. We'll go to Tom, Joe, and then Corey to wrap this thing up. Let's go.
Yeah, a lot of fun. And it's show in 3 weeks. Will Soto be signed by then? If he is, you're going to have two very sad boys and two very happy boys on this program.
No, thank you guys for making this show awesome. Thank you to Rich. Rich put all these graphics together. That was a lot of work for Rich. So shout out to Rich here, who did a great job with the graphics.
Yep, echo that completely. Great show. Love this. Again, one of my favorite shows of the year. And if we don't talk before then, happy Thanksgiving. I mean, there's a chance if something big breaks, we might have something live before then. But more likely than not, we'll see you post-holiday.
Absolutely. Thank you for that and that reminder. Yeah, Thanksgiving holiday's coming up. So cherish your loved ones. Enjoy the holiday. family, friends, whoever you consider near and dear. And a special thank you again to my co-hosts, as always. Thank you to our biggest supporters, and thank you to all of you for keeping us going. We really do appreciate it. We love you, and we'll talk to you soon on X in a couple weeks' time. Vampire State of Baseball. Take care.